Welcome back, friends, to Build a Lot Acres. I'm Case.
And I'm Brett.
In today's episode,
We'll be talking about firewood and what you need to know about each one.
so stay tuned. All right, so we're going to have with this 10 different species of wood here in this palette. Today we're going to talk about 5 of those species and different characteristics and things that you really should know as a wood burner. Now we're here in New England, so this is going to be mainly geared towards that region of the country, but if you're in a different section of the US or a different country in the world, you can take some of these principles. They may still be the same. Some of these trees can be worldwide, some are more regional, but you're going to get a good general knowledge of each type of species, which is why we're going to break it into 2 parts. We're going to have 5 in part 1 and then 5 more in part 2. That will keep the video a little shorter, won't be as drawn out. So let's get into it. So the first wood we're going to talk about, it's the only softwood I have on this palette, and this is Eastern White Pine. Now there's a lot of different types of pine. There's Eastern White, there's red, there's ponderosa, there's pitch pine. So depending on lodgepole, depending on where you live, some of these may not be available to you, but Eastern White Pine is very readily available here in New England, which is one of the reasons I process it. It's a good shoulder wood, meaning earlier in the season when it's not that cold and you don't need tons of heat. But the downside is it does burn a lot quicker than the hardwood, so you need a lot more of it to do the same heat. But I find that I get a lot of pine trying to get to the other hardwood trees that are better. So rather than throw it away or push it off to the side in the woods, you might as well burn it. But it does leave a lot of pitch. So I personally recommend cutting the tree down, letting it dry out before you start processing it, cutting it up, bucking it, and then splitting it. So I like to wait a couple months at least after I cut the tree down to let the pitch dry up a little bit before you go processing it, because it can be messy.
Yeah, what my dad normally does is with a lot of the hardwoods, he cuts it and then goes straight into processing it, then he lets it season. But with pine, what Noma does is he cuts it, then he lets it season somewhat, then he processes it, then he lets it season a little bit more, then he burns it.
So the woods we're going to talk about today all have different BTU values. That's how much energy is in the wood basically. So pine is one of the lowest, actually it is the lowest on this particular video. It's only going to have somewhere in the 15 to 18 million BTUs per cord. Some of the better hardwoods are going to have more like 25 to 30 million, which we'll get into next. So next on the list we're going to talk about is white ash. Now white ash is another great tree, but unfortunately in a lot of areas of the country, the ash trees are being invaded by the beetles. So a lot of them are dying out and they're not as prevalent as they once were, but it's an excellent hardwood. One of the best things about ash is one of the lowest moisture content trees when it's living. So when you cut ash, it starts out at a much lower moisture content than a lot of these other hardwoods. Therefore, it's much quicker to season and get into the wood stove and be under that 20% moisture content, which is the magic number you really need to have good heat.
Yeah, I'd say that I've always liked to burn ash because we have, as you know, we have a wood stove at our house. And we get a lot of oak, but whenever we get ash, it's always good because it's always nice, dry, whereas a lot of the oak is a little wet. You know, it's always very dry, just good stuff to burn, you know.
So I would say, I think the ash is somewhere around the 21 to 22 million BTUs per cord. So it's not as good as some of the other woods we're going to talk about, but it's much better than the white pine. And it seasons in about a year. The pine I didn't mention, but that's about 6 months. 6 to 12 months for the Eastern White Pine to season fully, and the ash is usually around a year. So it's another great choice for firewood. So third on the list, we're going to be talking about red maple. So red maple is another good choice for hardwood. It's going to be a little lower on the BTU scale. It's similar to ash. It's going to be somewhere around the 20 million BTU cord per cord mark, but it's a softer maple. It's not a hard maple like a rock maple is going to be, but it's a good wood. One of the things I don't like about the red maple in particular is it does rot fairly quickly if you leave it. So you have to make sure that you get it off the ground and stacked and covered, because it is a quicker rotting wood, but it's great for the mid-season. I wouldn't use it in the dead of winter when it's the coldest, but on those, 30-degree days where it's not too cold, 30 degrees Fahrenheit that is, it's a great wood. It does burn fairly quickly, but it does throw some good heat, and it's another great choice for firewood. So next up, we are going to talk about black cherry.
Black cherry is what you can smoke with, correct?
Yep, so cherry is a common smoking wood for meats and different things. And it's also a mid-grade wood. It's somewhere around, again, 19 to 21 million BTUs per cord. So it's not the highest grade wood, and splitting wise is, I'd say it's a mid-grade. It tends to grow a little bit crooked. It doesn't have straight pieces. The trees tend to be wavy, and the grain pattern is wavy, but it's not a terrible splitting wood. It's easy to process compared to a lot of other woods, and it's very easy to spot. It has like potato chip looking bark almost.
Actually, if I break off a small piece, you can see what he means, that it's very flat bark comparative to most other trees.
So the other great thing about cherry is that it smells really nice while you're burning it. So some people may not like the smell, but I personally find the aroma to be nice. And it's one of my more common woods in this area, or species of wood, I should say. So I personally like the cherry. So the last wood we're going to talk about today is going to be black birch. Now, black birch is one of the species that's not as common throughout the U.S. I know it's much more common in New England than it is in other parts of the United States. A lot of people might have heard of yellow birch or white paper birch. Black birch is much denser than the other birches. It has much higher BTUs. It's actually the highest BTU of the woods we're discussing today in this video. Black birch is, I believe, it's around 24 or 25 million BTUs per cord. So it's almost double what the white pine is. And it throws a lot of heat, has good coals. It's actually one of my favorite woods. I would say probably definitely my top 5, maybe top even 4. But one of the things to keep in mind with all the birches is they rot really quick. So one of the tricks that I've learned over the years is to slice the bark lengthwise to allow the moisture to get out, because the bark of the birch is pretty waterproof and it holds the moisture in. So if you don't get that split open fairly quickly, the birches do rot out a lot quicker than some of the other species of wood. But it's about I'd say a 2-year seasoning wood. So it takes about 2 years to season fully. The black birch is about 2. I would say the black cherry is around a year and a half. Eastern white pine is about 6 to 12 months. Ash is 6 to 12 months. And the red maple is around a year and a half or so, 2 years sometimes. So those are the first 5 types of wood that we're going to discuss. Please stay tuned for part 2, where we'll be discussing 5 more.